All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into this really intense, multi-layered debate that's just raging right now among Silicon Valley insiders. It's all about the future of artificial intelligence. We're going to unpack everything, from how this tech might be regulated down the line to the very real, day-to-day impact it's going to have on your livelihood. We'll be breaking down some pretty complex arguments from industry heavyweights, venture capitalists, and actually even the Vatican. It's really about showing you the opposing forces that are shaping our future right now.
Let's actually kick things off with a voice you probably didn't expect to hear in a tech debate. This is a powerful quote from Pope Francis. It's from his recent 235-page encyclical, Magnifica Humanatis, which translates to Magnificent Humanity, and it perfectly highlights these massive global anxieties about who is actually going to control AI. His main point here is that AI itself isn't inherently evil, right? But technology is never neutral. It basically inherits the motives, the biases of the exact people holding the purse strings and writing the code.
Okay, real quick, here's our roadmap for today. 1. The Pope's AI warning. 2. Designing a digital god. 3. The open source battle. 4. Job killer or creator. And 5. The AI-enabled survivor. It's a fascinating journey, and we're going from the halls of the Vatican straight into the code bases of big tech.
All right, Section 1. The Pope's AI warning. Historical echoes and the fear of centralization. Our first major conflict really centers on this exact issue of centralized power, something the Vatican is heavily emphasizing with their recent calls for strict AI regulation.
So the core issue for the Pope is that he's warning against this sort of Orwellian concentration of technological dominance. He's basically asking, is AI going to be used to just consolidate power for a tiny elite, or is it actually going to serve everyone? And what's wild is that leading tech giants, we're talking Google, Meta, Amazon, they actually went to the Vatican to lobby the Pope, trying to get him to soften his stance on this. But he didn't budge. He is absolutely steadfast on wanting guardrails, a ban on autonomous weapons, and real protections to ensure this tech serves humanity.
But it's super interesting to contrast these theological warnings with historical data. Pope Francis is actually kind of mirroring Pope Leo XIII, who raised very similar alarms about the Industrial Revolution way back in 1891. But, looking at the data since 1891, technological capitalism actually drove the global work week down from over 60 hours to just 34 hours. It wiped out mass child labor, bumped global life expectancy up by 60%, and just drastically increased global prosperity. So the big debate today is, will AI follow that historical trend of massive human uplift, or is it truly different this time?
Moving on to Section 2. Designing a digital god. The philosophies driving frontier AI labs. This brings us to the fiercely debated motives of frontier labs like Anthropic, where the leaders are publicly expressing these deep, almost apocalyptic fears about the exact technology they're racing to build.
So you might be wondering, why would the people building the tech be sounding the biggest alarms? Well, some insiders argue it's a classic game theory move called regulatory capture. The theory is that these labs are pushing these apocalyptic warnings just to scare governments into creating like an FDA for AI. Because if you suddenly require a massive, super expensive government approval process for every new model, boom, you've effectively locked out all your smaller open source competitors, and you've basically handed yourself a permanent monopoly.
So we're looking at two very different, very wild theories side by side here. On one hand, regulatory capture, which honestly is a brilliant, if kind of cynical corporate strategy to dominate a trillion-dollar market. On the other hand, you have what some are calling the Dr. Frankenstein theory. This is the idea that these leaders aren't just writing software. They literally believe they are midwifing a superior digital species. So, time to prep the lab coats and lightning rods, right?
Taking them completely at their word, some of these lab leaders envision a future of just absolute abundance. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, wrote this huge essay called Machines of Loving Grace, which is inspired by a poem featuring this exact quote. In this philosophy, human labor is basically obsolete. Instead, an economy of AI systems decides how to allocate resources to us based on some sort of computational reward function. To some people, returning to our mammal brothers and sisters sounds like an absolute utopia. To others, it sounds like the premise of a terrifying sci-fi movie.
All right, Section 3. The open source battle. The push for decentralized technology. Standing in stark, total opposition to these centralized labs is the rapidly growing open source and open weight movement. This is essentially the counterforce to that centralized digital god.
To avoid a dystopian scenario where your access to AI and maybe your economic survival is completely dictated by one corporate or government policy, advocates are pushing hard for intelligence sovereignty. Think of it as the ultimate evolution of privacy. It's not just about keeping people out of your photos, it's about making sure a centralized AI isn't scanning your emails and telling you how to interpret reality. It's the ability to run these incredibly powerful models locally, right on your own machines, totally free of a corporate middleman.
When you stack these two ecosystems up, the case for open source gets really compelling. It's a battle between a highly regulated choke point and a completely decentralized network. Big organizations, from healthcare to high finance, they are absolutely terrified of being locked into a single tech giant's terms of service. They want the freedom to swap out models on the fly without risking massive data leaks or running afoul of changing political policies. So, open source is really acting as the ultimate backstop for software freedom.
Section 4, Job Killer or Creator, the divided view on AI and labor. This is probably the most heated debate inside tech right now. Are we looking at a total job apocalypse, or is AI going to trigger an unprecedented boom in productivity and coding?
The job displacement side points to some heavy, harsh realities. Just to put it in perspective, Amazon alone is reportedly looking to eliminate up to 600,000 future positions. 600,000! And that's largely due to implementing AI and massive new robotic sorting systems.
People arguing the displacement theory point out that CEOs are aggressively using AI to just consolidate roles across the board. Look at the massive layoffs, like Meta cutting thousands of jobs. The idea here is that middle management, the people whose entire job is just tracking what other people do, the professional measurers, they're the first to be automated. Companies are pushing for hyper-efficiency, figuring out they can do way more with far fewer humans and just massively boosting their operating margins.
But then you have the counter perspective. And it points to this really surprising data from 2024. AI has completely revolutionized code generation, right? You would think an AI that writes code would put human developers out of work instantly. And yet, software developer job postings have actually surged 15% year over year. They've hit a 3-year high in a market where coding is literally the #1 enterprise use case for AI. So what is actually going on here?
Well, the answer lies in this absolutely staggering number. 1.1 billion. That is the number of GitHub code commits in a single recent month. That's a 14 times year-over-year increase. The reality is, when you make software exponentially easier and cheaper to build, you don't stop building it. You just create an absolute explosion of bespoke, custom applications. And all that new, complex code, it still requires humans to manage it, architect it, and direct it.
This synthesis from Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon really nails the job creator argument. He says it's not about eliminating 25% of jobs, it's about automating 25% of work hours. The whole idea is that widespread AI adoption triggers a huge productivity boom. By freeing workers from mundane, repetitive tasks, they can actually tackle higher complexity problems and generate way more value for the economy as a whole.
Which brings us to Section 5, the AI-enabled survivor. How to maintain personal agency. Look, regardless of who is right in the economic or regulatory debates, all of our sources agree on one absolute certainty. Surviving this revolution requires extreme personal adaptation.
Here is the critical vulnerability. Gallup polling shows that roughly 59% of the workforce right now are basically ambivalent, quiet quitters. They're just going through the motions. In an AI-driven economy, if you lack high agency, enthusiasm, or curiosity, you are without a doubt the most vulnerable to being replaced by these systems.
So how do you protect yourself? You have to move from just consuming technology to actively building with it. You need to become the most AI-enabled version of yourself possible. Lean in. Treat tools like Claude or ChatGPT as your literal daily coworkers. Start doing what's called vibe coding, which basically means talking to the AI to help you build custom tools, even if you don't know a single line of code yourself. You have to treat learning as a proactive, lifelong journey. Right now, the most marketable skill isn't just knowing your industry inside and out. It's being the absolute most AI-proficient person in your office.
I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought from Bart Cuban. Take a hard look at the tools available to you today. How you answer this question, whether you're using AI to cheat your way out of doing the work or using it to learn and build faster than you ever thought possible. That choice is going to entirely dictate your place in the AI economy of tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.